Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. Last show of the week, just FYI. No gambling show with Kelly Stewart this week. A little bit of housekeeping for all of you. Next week, we will be live in New Orleans with OutKick the shows on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Kelly Stewart and I will be doing a gambling special from New Orleans on Wednesday. Then I'll do OutKick the show Thursday, Friday. I'm told that we have a cool OutKick set that is all set up for New Orleans. It is a Fox Super Bowl. Should be a fun event down there. Look forward to seeing many of you out and about at New Orleans. No show tomorrow because I got to hop a flight. I think I've said this on the show. I am guest hosting on Saturday and Sunday Fox and Friends weekend. So I will be on. I know I did because I made fun of how many hours. In the event that you thought to yourself, hey, you know what? 15 hours of Clay Travis on radio isn't enough. Several more hours of Clay Travis on OutKick the show. Several more hours of Clay Travis in all facets video-wise was not enough for me this week. I will have 8 hours more for you on Saturday and Sunday. So I will be live on Fox News from 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern Saturday and 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. Set your weekend plans accordingly. Looking forward to doing that. Never hosted Fox and Friends. Been on a bunch of times as a guest. So it's a new fun challenge from their New York City studios. So you will get that if you want to put on Fox News. Saturday and Sunday, you will be able to see even more of me and all of that shaking out. So let's dive into a lot of different stories out there. And I'm going to start with what I think is unquestionably by far the biggest story of the past several days, and it is an awful one, the plane crash that occurred in the D.C. area. Coming from Wichita to Washington, D.C., reports 60 passengers died on that plane crash, along with 4 crew members and pilots, 64 total there, 3 military members killed in the Black Hawk helicopter crash for a total of 67 lives lost right before 9 o'clock Eastern yesterday evening. I've been riveted on this story, and I want to say thank you to all of you who are just incredible on social media. When I seek out opinion, and the same thing happened on Clay and Buck, the number of pilots who weigh in and tell us what they think is really pretty phenomenal. And I want to say thank you to everybody who weighed in. You can still go look at it. I believe, and Adam, you can check the most recent numbers, I believe 16 million people read the thread of the plane crash into the helicopter image, a video that I shared. And then I asked for people who fly helicopters or airplanes, pilots, to weigh in with what they thought when they saw it, because when I watched that collision, that video version of the collision, it was frankly unbelievable to see, and I wanted to get as much expertise out there as we possibly could. And so I am impressed at how many great comments and analysis you guys brought to bear there. Now, and I think we, to a large extent, meaning the experts out there who are pilots, have to a large extent figured out what is likely to have occurred. And reading from the Wall Street Journal, for people out there that are that have been busy, that have not been following this case, air traffic control has already gone out of the audio here. And so I'm reading from the Wall Street Journal just after 8:47 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. An air traffic controller at Reagan National Airport relayed a seemingly ordinary inquiry and instruction. PAT 25, do you have the CRJ in sight? That was what the air traffic controller asked a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. It told them to look out. PAT 25, passed behind the CRJ, the controller said. And CRJ is aviation shorthand for Canada Air Regional Jet. 19 seconds later, the helicopter flew into the plane's path, and everyone on both the helicopter and the airplane was killed. Now, the investigation is ongoing, but it appears to me, based on all of the reading that I have done from a variety of different pilots, the calls that we took from helicopter pilots, airplane pilots, this Wall Street Journal report, the most likely explanation for what happened is the helicopter pilot did not see the airplane that he ran into. And I suspect as more of this evidence comes out, what will emerge is an analysis of, was the air traffic controller's description and instructions specific enough for the helicopter pilot, and or did the helicopter pilot misapprehend the aircraft that was being referred to and not realize what the air traffic controller was saying? That seems clearly to me to be the case for what the evidence suggests happens here. Now, that is this specific situation. It appears to have been some form of pilot and or air traffic controller error, human error. Now, that's the specific. The internet, and I've written and talked about this forever, it can be something significant, like, hey, why did an NFL official screw up this call? Insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Or something very significant, an airplane crash. The internet almost immediately, in all facets, jumps from, hey, the specific event that occurred, before we even know all of the details of the specific event, directly to, hey, who is to blame on a global level, right? Not the specific incident. The global level analysis almost immediately begins, right? So you have school shooting. Instead of diagnosing everything specifically on that school shooting, you have global analysis. Oh, we need gun control. Oh, we need armed school resource officers, before the analysis of the individual incident is even completely known. What I would say is resist, and I know it's hard, resist the goal to immediately globally analyze. Sometimes I can be guilty of this. I try to tell myself, hey, don't immediately globalize an individual incident, because that's where people almost immediately go. This appears to have been pilot error. First commercial plane airliner to have gone down since 2009. Sadly, of the 60 passengers on this flight from Wichita to D.C., it appears 14 of those passengers were connected to figure skating and a competition that was taking place there in Wichita. So it appears, again, this was pilot error. We can take, it appears, off of the equation what a lot of people said, oh, this was a terror attack, or oh, this was intentional in some way. That can be taken off the table. And there is plenty of time to address larger issues. For instance, are there enough air traffic controllers? Was it smart to have a night training exercise for the military taking place in an area that is filled with this much air traffic? Was the helicopter pilot to blame? How do you assess blame for the airline pilot, the air traffic controller? The larger issues of, are we getting the most talented people to be here? And almost immediately, I saw guys like Bakari Sellers at CNN immediately blaming Trump for the air traffic incident before we even knew what happened. So again, until we know the specifics, I don't think we can analyze the larger implications and or take lessons from them. Let me say this, positive. I don't know that any industry in America does a better job of investigating and determining what went wrong than the airline industry. They are incredible at the degree to which they are able to break down everything that goes wrong in an airplane flight. And as a result, we have made commercial aviation infinitely safer than it otherwise would be, because we learn from whatever goes wrong and we try to ensure that that error does not occur again. And so I know a lot of you are nervous about air travel. I certainly think when I'm in the air and we start to have a little bit of turbulence or bouncing around, I certainly think, okay, this could be it. I think most airline travelers think that at some point in time. I'm flying tomorrow. I was flying into D.C. last week. I'll be flying into D.C. at a minimum again this summer because I'm going to be doing my show, Clay and Buck, up there for a couple of weeks. So I understand why people are nervous, but I actually have a great deal of confidence in the airline industry in general and our ability to make commercial airplane travel as safe as possible for everybody. We got to keep the best possible people involved, all of those aspects. But that is my analysis, and I thank you guys for doing what I thought was really incredible analysis. Let me also say this. Adam just texted me, 17 million people read and or looked at the thread of this airline crash on Twitter on my @ClayTravis account. 17 million of them. X in general, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, the amount of impact that these threads can have is substantial. Like when I asked why college football ratings are down and millions of views and thousands of comments were made, I can guarantee you that a lot of people involved in college football are actually going through reading some of those comments and considering your opinions. The amount of audience for a thread is oftentimes now more substantial than many different television networks out there. So media is evolving quickly. I thank you guys for sharing your expertise. I try to ask it for your opinions and your analysis. I'll give you what I think. But as I always say, and I say it on the air all the time, I say it on this show all the time, I don't pretend to be an expert in everything. I know there are a lot of experts out there. What I try to do is look at the expert opinion, be reasonable, rational, almost like I'm on a jury, and analyze what the evidence would suggest and try to determine what I think is the most likely outcome. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong. But I appreciate all of you for adding your expertise there. Okay, a couple of other stories that are out there right off the top. There is a story that is out right now, and I have not, to be candid with you, read all of the analysis of it, but I want to make sure we mention it. And Adam, you can correct me if I'm wrong on the details here. 6 different women have accused Baltimore Ravens Hall of Fame kicker Justin Tucker of inappropriate behavior during massages. Correct me if I'm wrong on that again, because I have not had time to dive into the specifics of this. Justin Tucker has come out and said, all of this is not true. I have never done anything inappropriate, and he is attacking the underlying aspect of the story itself. And I want to, the story was written by the Baltimore Banner, and Justin Tucker has been accused, the headline, of inappropriate sexual behavior by 6 massage therapists. And Adam is telling me several therapists said Tucker's behavior was so egregious they ended his sessions early or refused to work on him again. And at 2 spas, management said they banned Tucker from returning. Now, this, of course, sounds somewhat similar to some of the allegations that are out there against Deshaun Watson, for which he was suspended. And the statement is out there from Tucker. He says that he has done nothing wrong. It is a very detailed statement. He says they are unequivocally false. He says, I've never been accused of misconduct of any kind, never been accused of acting inappropriately in front of a massage therapist or during a massage. The article takes innocuous, ambiguous interactions, skews them out of proportion so that they're no longer recognizable. And the paper's work was marked, he says, this is according to kicker Justin Tucker, marked by journalistic failures at every turn. And I'm reading directly from his statement. When I first learned the newspaper was writing this article, they refused to reveal the full claims. It wasn't until I was forced to hire the leading defamation law firm in the U.S. to write to the paper that they finally revealed what they were planning on writing. He says they gave him next to no time to provide a response and says they had no interest in what he or anyone else had to say. And again, these are his denials. It was apparent the newspaper was deliberately misconstruing events as nefarious, which were not, and relying on third-party speculation to create the false preconceived narrative about me they believed would generate clicks. The newspaper had already written a false, salacious profile well before ever attempting to speak to me or any of the bodywork professionals I've worked with closely for the better part of the last decade. Newspaper made no effort to interview key witnesses until prompted to do so by my defamation attorney because they didn't want to hear what they had to say about me. I've always made, this is again Justin Tucker's comments, I've always made a conscious effort to be considerate and respectful in all the interactions with the community that I love so much. Devastating to learn that anyone would feel I was offensive in any way. I maintain I did not act inappropriately at any point before, during, or after a professional bodywork treatment session. I would never intend to offend or hurt anyone. As a matter of principle, I respect when individuals come forward to report misconduct. I support these claims to be properly investigated, but for the sake of myself and my family, I cannot allow false claims to go unchallenged. I cannot be any clearer. These allegations are false and incredibly hurtful to both me and, more importantly, my family. Also, the NFL has issued a statement. And by the way, these occurrences allegedly occurred from 2012 to 2016. So over a decade ago, nearly a decade ago on the other side. NFL spokesman Brian McCarthy, we first became aware of the allegations from the reporter investigating this story as they were not previously shared. We take any allegations seriously. We'll look into the matter. Okay, so that is out there. Justin Tucker, Baltimore Ravens kicker, accused of sexually inappropriate behavior, dating according to the comments that I see from 2012 to 2016, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and 9 years ago on the range of those allegations. And Justin Tucker says that they are completely untrue. I will look more into this, and as this story may or may not warrant, we will either talk more or less about it next week during the Super Bowl. Justin Tucker's season is over. Justin Tucker probably doesn't have that many more years as a kicker in the NFL. On the field, I know that his success rate on kicks was not to the level necessarily that his history has suggested. I wonder on some level, this is just me speculating to be clear, I wonder on some level whether Justin Tucker not performing as well during the season might have been connected to this story and the pressure that he felt based on these allegations potentially coming out. It would be a far bigger story, by the way, if these allegations had come out while the Baltimore Ravens season was ongoing, or if the Baltimore Ravens had made the Super Bowl. The fact that these come out after the season is over means the Ravens, the NFL, Tucker, everybody else has plenty of time to look at these allegations and investigate them before we actually get to the opening of the NFL season. I'll also point out, I would think that there are no criminal charges or criminal investigations underway. And in fact, I believe all of these acts would be outside the term of any sort of lawsuit, either criminal or civil in nature, if that time frame of 2012 to 2016 is accurate. Furthermore, I will also point out that this is the way the Deshaun Watson story started. Initial allegations that continued to build to the point where I believe it was eventually over 30 different massage therapists alleged that Deshaun Watson had behaved inappropriately with them. And that ultimately led to no criminal charges, but Deshaun Watson settling those civil claims and later being suspended as a result. Step back again. There have been people who have been accused of actions. In particular, I believe punter Matt Araiza, who was drafted by the Buffalo Bills. Adam, I'm off the top of my head just running through this because this story is just broken. Accused of sexual assault relating to his behavior when he was a player at San Diego State at a house party. The civil lawsuit allegations came out. The Bills said, we're cutting him. And then the allegations, it turned out, according to investigations by San Diego police, were completely made up. And so Matt Araiza lost the ability to work as an NFL player based on what the San Diego police determined were false allegations. My point on this is just rushing to conclusions in the NFL or any other universe when it comes to allegations is dangerous. Look, Todd Golden this week got completely cleared of Title IX investigation allegations relating to his behavior by the University of Florida Title IX investigation, and many people were demanding that Todd Golden be fired when the allegations came out against him. I have talked before about the fact that I think Mel Tucker was unfairly fired, and I think there is still allegation pending over allegations that he violated Title IX based on his behavior with a woman who was speaking at Michigan State University. All of this to say, be very, what's the right phrase here? Be very careful not to draw a conclusion based on accusation. Whoever the athlete is, you go into the specifics. Sometimes it's going to be true. Sometimes it's going to be false. What do I always say with you? Men lie, women lie. Black people lie. White people lie. Asian people lie. Hispanic people lie. Gay people lie. Straight people lie. Also, all of those people also tell the truth. So using anyone's identity, male, female, racial, ethnic, sexuality, using any of those identity characteristics to determine whether you think the truth is being told or not is actually the antithesis of justice in America. There is a reason why Lady Justice is blind. The accusation has been made. Justin Tucker denies it. Let's see what the evidence shows going forward from here. Okay? So anyway, I just want to make sure I address it. Things that are much less serious, okay, than both of the first two stories that we talked about. Cam Newton. Let's go not serious at all. Cam Newton this morning on ESPN said that he would rather win the MVP than a Super Bowl. And he specifically pointed out guys like Nick Foles that have won Super Bowls that do not have the same caliber of resume as Cam Newton. Let me be clear about this. Cam Newton is one of the best college and NFL quarterbacks of his entire generation. Went to a Super Bowl, lost to that Super Bowl as the favorite to the Denver Broncos in Peyton Manning's final game. Cam won the national title at Auburn on a team that I think without Cam, probably a 9-3, 8-4 caliber Auburn Tiger team. In other words, Cam was way more talented and way more excellent on that team than frankly, one of the single best seasons I've ever seen a quarterback have in college football. And he took an otherwise team that I think would have been 8-4 or 9-3, and I think a lot of Auburn fans would agree with this, to the national title and going 14-0, getting a win over the Oregon Ducks in that title game. I was out there to watch that game. He also won the Heisman Trophy, deservedly. And he was the number one overall pick, and he was the NFL MVP, and he went to the Super Bowl. that makes him one of the most talented quarterbacks of his generation. So he speaks with some degree of authority. And he is correct that sometimes guys have won Super Bowls at the quarterback position without being incredibly elite at the quarterback position. But I think he's totally wrong on this. I think way more people would remember Cam Newton as a quarterback if he won a Super Bowl than are going to remember that he won an MVP. I think way more people will remember Russell Wilson for winning a Super Bowl than would have remembered him if he had won an MVP. Most of the time, people remember Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl. They're not going to know how many MVPs he won. We know that Tom Brady won 7 Super Bowls. I think Brady won 3 MVPs. We know that Peyton Manning won 2 Super Bowls. I think he might have won 4 or 5 MVPs. I know this because I'm a sports nerd. By far, most people remember how many Super Bowls you won as a starting quarterback, much more than they remember how many MVPs you won. I'll give you an example of my own fandom. Steve McNair was co-MVP with Peyton Manning. I love Steve McNair. I would infinitely rather Steve McNair have won a Super Bowl than to have won an MVP. Today, by the way, 25th anniversary of the Rams-Titans MVP, Kevin Dyson stretching for the goal line on the final play. Steve McNair's MVP, most of you don't even know that he won it. Again, I think he was the co-MVP with Peyton Manning. Would have happened maybe 2003-ish season. I know because I'm a diehard Titan fan and a diehard Steve McNair fan. I don't think most of you remember that at all. But if the Titans had won that Super Bowl, you would all remember Steve McNair having won that Super Bowl. I think what most people remember from that game, actually from a Cam Newton perspective, is when Cam Newton didn't dive on the fumble and made a business decision to let other people try to recover it. So Cam Newton, incredible talent, one of the greatest quarterbacks of his generation. But interestingly, that answer that he gave is actually very revealing, I think, of Cam Newton, which is he cares far more about individual acclaim than he does team success. And I would submit to you that may be one reason why Cam Newton doesn't have a Super Bowl, because he certainly had the talent to be able to win one. So anyway, you can debate that. I personally would rather have a Super Bowl ring than an MVP. To be fair to Cam, if you told me, hey, Clay, you can be the MVP of a really good team and they don't win the Super Bowl, or you can be somebody who's not that instrumental, you don't start on offense or defense, you're just on the bench, well, yeah, then I personally would rather win the MVP than be a bench rider or a backup who happened to get a Super Bowl ring. So to be fair, there is some analysis here. But if you are a starter playing at a high level, I think most people would rather win the Super Bowl than win the MVP. I bet Dan Marino would say, yeah, I'd much rather win the Super Bowl. I bet Jim Kelly would say, I'd much rather win the Super Bowl. I bet the quarterbacks who came close to winning Super Bowls that never were quite able to get it done would far rather win Super Bowls than get MVPs. Okay, some other stories out there. Adam Silver came out, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, who I believe has been the leader as the NBA's brand has been destroyed. I think the brand created by Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, built by Michael Jordan, continued by Kobe, about halfway through LeBron's career, he decided to start lighting the NBA on fire, decided that he was Muhammad Ali and that he needed to speak out about how awful America was. And it culminated in 2020 with everybody wearing names on the back of their jerseys that were not their names, but were actually political slogans. And since then, the NBA has never recovered as a brand. A lot of people just stopped watching. I think Adam Silver's responsible, along with LeBron, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, for helping to destroy the NBA. And I think they need to move on the NBA's brand. Now, they're still making money. They're benefiting from the fact that streaming has come onto the scene and that television ratings don't matter as much as they did before. So they have benefited from the structural rise of the larger sports ecosystem in the streaming era, such that their destruction of the brand, while it has come down in value, the value of sports in media at large has risen. So that has helped to defray the destruction of the brand. But if you wonder what Adam Silver really thinks, as opposed to what he has said publicly and been protected by the media for saying, he's now talking about turning 48-minute NBA games into 40-minute NBA games. That is what, 20% of the NBA game would go back to the same length as a college basketball game, and you would have 4 10-minute quarters instead of 4 12-minute quarters. And he says he wants to do this because he wants to try to make it a 2-hour game as opposed to a longer game. Here's what I would say about that. You don't make drastic changes to your sport if things are going well. If things are going well, you finesse around the edges. You don't want to miss with success. This is a break the glass, the fire is going moment for Adam Silver to acknowledge this publicly. It's also a recognition that load management and the degree to which the number of NBA players sit out of games has become out of control, because in essence, this would take 20% of the NBA season and wipe it off in terms of total minutes. It's like taking roughly an 82-game season and chopping it down to, I don't know, a 66-game season, right? Because in terms of the minutes played, this would be a 66-game season as opposed to an 82-game season when you're cutting 20% of the overall minutes off, okay? You got to end load management. And you got to go back to an era when players respect fans and appreciate them going to the games, instead of one where players are always trying to get fans kicked out of arenas and when they're attacking the overall fans for their behavior in the arenas. And what I would say in general about this is, to me, what you really need to do is, if I were Adam Silver, I'd say, okay, every single player that sits out of a game because they are managing the load, right? They just don't want to play because they don't want the stress on their bodies of an 82-game season. Whenever you sit out a game in the NBA and you are not on the injured list, right? Like for a substantial period of time. I'm not talking about if you tear an ACL or if you have an awful ankle sprain and you're legitimately in rehab, right? I'm just talking about, hey, I don't want to play on the second day of a back-to-back. I don't want to have to travel and then play. All these things that NBA players do now. You should have to, and I think this is a Charles Barkley idea, you should have to sit on the concourse and pose for photos with kids and sign autographs for them for the entire length of the game. And I look at this as somebody who is a dad, who was fortunate to have a dad that took me to games. If you don't respect the fan who might get, when they're a kid, one ticket to go to a game for Christmas, and you're expecting dad or mom to go look at the schedule and determine what the back-to-back likelihood of games is, or think about how this game factors in to the larger travel picture. You're flying on private jets. It ain't that hard. You are staying in the best hotels in the world. You should be able to play. And if you don't, and there's tons of kids out there, I mean kids, not adults getting autographed, I'm talking about kids, then you should have to pose for photos with all those kids there, and you should have to sign their autographs. That honors the fan that is paying your salary. I think that's a no-brainer. That's what I would do if I were Adam Silver. Guess what would happen? I think you'd have a lot less players sitting out, because it's actually draining, probably more draining than playing a football game, to sit and sign autographs and pose for photos for the entire length of a game. But I think that would potentially alter things. Big decision that was made in the ACC. ESPN has decided, they had until February 1st to sign on and extend the ACC's deal with ESPN until 2036. This likely forestalls any movement of Florida State or Clemson to another conference. Remember, they filed a lawsuit. It also further solidifies the stupidity of the ACC's 20-year decision to sign on with ESPN in 2016. I've talked to a lot of people in sports media about this deal, and I don't blame ESPN, which got a killer deal, from re-upping on that deal. They should. If you have an opportunity as a business to take advantage of an incredibly lucrative deal that you negotiated with a sophisticated partner in the ACC, and they want out of the deal that they signed, I don't blame ESPN for re-upping and saying, no, we're going to keep it. I do think that the story of the ACC going exclusively to ESPN in 2016 is one of the worst decisions that any league has made in sports in the 21st century. The deal that the ACC got was an awful one. They gave everything to ESPN. They didn't get fair market value. They didn't get Fox bidding. They didn't get CBS bidding. They didn't get NBC bidding. They went exclusively to ESPN. And ESPN, to their credit, got a great business deal. And you know the deal wasn't good because Florida State and Clemson are trying to sue to get out of it because those schools are making a fraction of what the Big Ten and the SEC are making. And I don't blame ESPN for re-upping, but I think the story of how the ACC did this deal without going to market is one of the great failures of the conferences or sports providing entities out there in the universe at large. A couple of other stories that are out there. Stephen A. Smith. I saw this and I flagged it because I wanted to make sure that I talked about it. Stephen A. Smith was one of the top contenders in the Democrat poll for who the presidential nominee should be in 2028. And we've got an article up about it at OutKick. Stephen A. Smith got 2% Democrat support. Now, Kamala was up top, if I remember correctly. Mayor Pete, I think Stephen A. Smith would actually be a way better candidate than Mayor Pete. Stephen A. Smith, 2% Democrat support. You may think this is crazy. I think Stephen A. may run for president. I think, why else is he going around suddenly talking about politics? He's going to make $25 million a year or whatever the heck it is from ESPN to go on First Take and talk about the topics that he does. I just thought it was super fascinating that he now is registering. He's been ripping the Democrat Party to shreds. He's been attacking Kamala. He's been trying to, it appears to me, sort of find a niche, middle ground niche between Democrats and Republicans, and now he is showing up with 2% Democrat support. Can we poll me? Can we poll me on the Republican side and see if I can get 2% support? I think I could. I think I could get 2% nationwide support right now on the Republican side for President of the United States if my name was included among the potential contenders like Stephen A's was. All right. Last thing, this is cool. I like this idea. I think it is a very smart decision. Nashville, my hometown, there is a bid for Nashville to get a WNBA team. And that bid is being underwritten by the owner of the Nashville Predators franchise. And they said that if they get a WNBA team, they would name it after Pat Summitt. And I don't know if it's the Nashville Summit or the Tennessee Summit. I think it's the Tennessee Summit. But I think that's a brilliant idea. Pat Summitt is one of the greatest coaches in the history of college athletics. She would have ended up with records that would never be touched because she became a head coach for the first time in women's basketball at the age of 26. Gino Auriemma, there are lots of people out there who would say he's the greatest women's basketball coach of all time now. He and Pat Summitt used to have an incredible rivalry going head-to-head. Dawn Staley, probably the most successful women's basketball coach right now in the game, given what she's done at South Carolina. But I love this idea. I love Pat Summitt. Grew up watching the Lady Vols. Loved everything about her leadership and the character and culture she created. for the Tennessee Lady Vol athletic program. And I think it would be an incredible honor and a fabulous name if Nashville were to get a WNBA franchise, to name that franchise after Pat Summitt, who I think is the greatest women's basketball coach of all time. And she would have, if she had not gotten Alzheimer's, in her 50s, she would have likely set records that would never be equaled for the rest of women's basketball history, because I just don't think that many people are going to become head coaches of major programs at 26 years old like she did back in the day. So I love this idea. Bill Haslam, I believe, would be the owner. Peyton Manning involved. Other individuals associated with ownership of that franchise. I think it's a great idea, and I hope that ends up happening, and they do name the franchise after Pat Summitt, who definitely deserves it for her legacy, wisdom, culture, and success, and what she did for women's basketball when truly almost no one was paying attention to it. Those UConn-Tennessee rivalries back in the day, Tennessee-Vanderbilt when they were 1-2 with Pat Summitt. I watched all those games. My dad is a monster Pat Summitt fan, probably one of his favorite coaches ever, certainly one of mine as well, and we watched a lot of these games back in the day in the Travis household. All right, love all of you. Headed up to New York tomorrow. We'll host Fox and Friends Saturday and Sunday, and then we'll be back with you Monday with OutKick, the show from right here at this very desk. I'll do Clay and Buck tomorrow to close up shop for the week before, again, you get 8 hours of more television. I haven't done before, so we'll see how it goes on Saturday and Sunday in New York with Fox and Friends. Love you guys. DBAP unless you need a SBAP. This has been OutKick, the show. Have fabulous weekends. I'll see you on this show Monday.